connect now the moisture sensor. So the moisture sensor is going to come in a kit with these forks. These forks are what the sensor, how the sensor is reading. It's just basically a big resistor. This is going to go into your soil. And then this is the sensitivity regulator. So there's a little screw right here, or a little Phillips head right here that you can take a screwdriver and you can place this in here and you can turn and adjust the sensitivity of that. We're not going to do that right now. Right now we're just going to connect the wires. So the first thing, connect them to via wires. So the first thing we want to do is we want to connect these two leads. Okay, you can see I'm holding it in this orientation because that's the way I want the wires to connect. Now each kit's going to come with different color wires. So again, don't pay attention to the color of the wires as much as to where these wires are going. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug these two in. Okay, and I have the purple on the bottom and the white on the top. Okay, if you look here, there's a little L on the sensor, so we'll say L is the white part. Okay, so now when I plug this in here, I want again, I'm holding this in the same orientation that I had it. The white is going to go on the top. Okay, that's where my L was, and then the purple is going to go on the bottom. So when I hold these two up to one another, okay, the wires are the same, connecting the port that way. Again, I can't stress enough, don't get fixated on the colors, more so where the wires are going. Okay, the next thing we want to look at is in our sensor, okay, there's 4 pins. One that says AO, that's analog out. Then the next one is DO, that's digital out. Then the third one is GND, which stands for ground. And then the fourth one is VCC, which stands for voltage. We're only going to be using 3 of these leads, okay? So we'll start first with the power. Power, we're going to use a white cable. Okay, so VCC will be white, and ground will be green. And then we're going to be using, now our last 2 options are analog out or digital out. This is the type of data that's going to be giving back to value that's going to be giving back to our microbit that we're going to analyze for what's wet and what's not wet. So we're going to be using an analog system. So AO, so plug the blue into AO. Now, the difference between analog and digital is the number value that is going to be read by the microbit or given off by the sensor. So digital out or DO would give us a value of 1 or 0. So 1 could be wet, 0 could be dry. Analog is going to give us a range of numbers. So we could say from like 0 to 100, what's dry and what's wet. So like wet could be 55 and dry could be 0. Those are just hypothetical numbers, but it's going to give us a little bit more information coming out that we can actually dial in our program to tell us what's wet and what's dry. So in some of your kits, some kits might have the male pins coming off of these jumpers. Others you might have to attach little baby jumper wires that are male to male to get that male off. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect these. I'm going to go green to green, white to white, blue to blue. Again, your colors might be different in your kit. All depends on the kit you're getting. Read your instructions, but more importantly, understand that where are these wires going, not the color of them. Okay, so I'm taking some tape here, and again, just connecting these is just a little bit of a fail-safe plan so that these wires don't come out. Now we're ready to plug this in to our PCB board. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to take our wires and we're going to put it through the same hole that we have the wires coming through for the hydrothermograph. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull those wires through. Okay, now we're going to be connecting this to P1. Okay, first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my voltage is set to 5 volts. So again, you can do this under power, but take out your jumper, okay, and make sure that it's in the 2 right leads indicating 5 volt power. Okay, so our sensors are 5 volts, and then some of our other components are going to be 12. All right, so now we're going to go and we're going to plug in our wires. So we're going to do our voltage first. So our voltage was our white wire. So take your screwdriver, press it in, push the lead in. Okay, that's going to be for voltage. The next one is going to be our signal, which is blue. So the blue, sorry, the in port, in. Okay. Now, I just want to reiterate here, it's not going into out, even though our on our board it says out. What that means on the board is that it's giving out data, and then on this connector here it says in, so that means it's taking in data. And then lastly, we'll do our ground, which goes into common. So go ahead and press this in. Okay, so there we have those three plugged in. Okay, and again, check by pulling on them to make sure that the indicator or that the LED, that the wires are in securely. Go ahead and power it up by plugging in your power supply, and then you should see on here 2 green lights. Okay, if you see 2 green lights, that means that it's powered up correctly. It's now time to create a program for the moisture sensor. So in the previous lab, we were able to download an extension that gave us the value of the DHT11 sensor. In this lab, we're not able to just grab and download or grab an extension that we download. We actually have to make a new variable and assign that new variable the word we'll call it moisture sensor, but then we're going to have to identify what the parameters of that moisture sensor is. So it's kind of a cool lab. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go to variables and we're going to type in the word moisture sensor. So we're going to say make new variable moisture sensor. Okay. I already did that, so I'm not going to hit OK. But once you do that, you're going to get 3 blocks. One that says set moisture sensor to. This block we're going to be using to identify what pin the sensor is going to be. Then it's going to say change moisture sensor by, and then there's going to be just a variable block. Okay, so we're going to be using these throughout the lab. So we're going to go ahead and create a new forever loop. So go up to basic forever. Okay, I'm just going to put it under here for now. Okay, and just give me a little bit of room. In here, we now have to set the moisture sensor. So we're going to go to variables, and we're going to hit set moisture sensor to. We're going to say set moisture sensor to what? And then now in this 2 is where we're going to be putting in a big function that's going to allow us to calibrate it. So we're going to go to math. We're going to go down to the word map. We're going to take this in and place it here. So we're going to set moisture sensor to map, and then it says from low to high, from low to high. So the first thing we need to do is we need to have it map it from the intake pin on our moisture sensor. So we're going to go down to advanced. We're going to go to pins. We want it to do an analog read. So we're going to say analog read pin, and we're going to say pin 1 because that's where our moisture sensor is at. So right now what it's doing is it's mapping a value from the data it's reading from the analog pin 1. All right, so now we need to work with these 4 numbers here. So it says from low to high, from low to high. Okay, so this is a 750 ohm resistor within this moisture sensor. So that means it's just a resistor that can measure up to 750 ohms. So where it says 1073, we're going to write 750. I got that number from the technical data sheet of the actual sensor. So it'll give us a reading from 0 to 750, which is a huge amount of numbers. We want to narrow that down so it's not so complicated so we can see what wet is and what dry is. So instead of going from 0 to 750, we're going to go from 0 to 100. So we're narrowing down the data that's going to be given off read on our LCD screen. Okay, you can mess around, you can try 50, you can try 20, you can try 10. I just put 100 for this lab, but I want you to encourage you to kind of mess around. Once you write this code and test it, I want you to change those numbers and see what number you see is fit. Okay, so now I'm just going to put that out of the way, and now we're going to go back up to this code. Okay, so in this code, we're going to be continuing what our LCD is displaying, and we want it to display our moisture value. So we have pause 6 seconds, clear. Now we want to bring in a new show string. That show string is going to be our humidity sensor, and what we want to do is have it show humidity, and then we want it to show the word updating, and then we want it to repeat. All right, so let's start with showing word moisture sensor. So moisture sensor. Okay. And we want this to be at 0, 0. Okay. Now we're going to have a show number. And the number we want it to show is coming from the moisture sensor. So we're going to go to our variables, and we're going to grab this block, and that's going to be the number it's showing. Now I want it to show here at 12, right? And then I'm going to go to 1. And you might ask, why are we having this go at 1 instead of 0? Because in our show string, this is on the first row. Well, moisture sensor is more than 12 characters. So it's not going to show up if the moisture sensor number is not going to show up if it's covered by the word moisture sensor. So that's important to note. Okay, so now I'm going to hit pause, or put a pause in. This pause is going to indicate how long that this is showing. So I'm just going to have it do 2 seconds. Why might you ask, aren't we doing 6 like we did before? You can have it as 6, but there's only one number to read here, so I just assume make it a little bit shorter. All right. Now we're going to put in a clear LCD. So you want to clear it. Now I want to bring in a show string number and have it be the word updating. All right. So write updating. Then I'll put 3 periods, indicating that it is updating. Then I'm going to do another pause. I want this to show for 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second, and then I want it to clear out something. I'm just going to move this a little bit out of the way. So what we have here in our new code is it's showing the word moisture sensor, it's showing the number moisture sensor for 2 seconds, it's clearing, then it's showing the word updating, then it's doing it for 1 second, and then it's clearing. So let's go ahead and download this. So there's our 32 and 10. As I mentioned before, sometimes it takes a second to calibrate. Now the moisture sensor has given me a value of 74.8. And now I reset it. The temperature is showing, the humidity is showing for 6 seconds. Then the moisture sensor for 2 seconds. Then updating for 1 second, and then it's looping through again. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my moisture sensor, and I have a wet paper towel here, and I'm just going to hold the moisture sensor in my wet paper towel, and I want to see if my humidity or my moisture changes value, which it did. It went to 48.5. So I'm going to go ahead, take it out of the moisture sensor, paper towel out of the moisture sensor, and dry it and see if we get a different value. So you can see here, dry and wet, we are getting different values. So we were able to program this correctly. Now in the future lab, you're actually going to be putting this in the soil, in dry soil and in wet soil, and we're going to be actually getting the values more exact. This was just using a wet paper towel. Go ahead and program this lab.